Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the FamVestor podcast. I am your host, Sonny Burns.
I am your co-host, Bailey Burns.
Yes, and we have our third co-host here today, Alvin Burns. Do you want to say your name?
I can't.
You can't. Okay, anyway, guys, today we have an exciting show. We've known her for 6 years, 6 years now. It's been pretty cool. We love her. Jill Cherrey. She is a, certified marriage preparation counselor, has counseled over 80,000 couples to get prepared for marriage. And she's also taught NFP. She's a certified NFP, natural family planning instructor. She's taught over 200 couples, including ourselves, 6 years ago as we were preparing for marriage and looking for, alternatives to traditional hormonal birth control. And, just thinking about when we want to intentionally start our family. And yeah, so excited to dig in deep with her. I love her positive attitude. She says she's happier 30 years after marriage than on her wedding day. And she's constantly growing. And, I feel like every person we like to bring on this show, I have one question, one requirement, and that is, do you love the life you're building? And if you can say yes to that show, then I want you on. But if you can't say yes to that, then, I want you to rethink about your life and think about what you're building towards. You want this purpose in your life and you want to be building towards. So I love all the guests we've had. They're all building towards something great. They're loving life and they're really passionate about what they're doing. And I think a lot of that comes from taking 100% responsibility for your life. No one else has control over your life. It's you. You determine the actions. You determine how the course of your life. And once you take 100% responsibility, once you stop blaming other people for how your life is, that is when, I feel like you truly get happy with what you're producing, get happy with your life, and take full control of it. So with that, let's get on the show. Oh, a couple more points about Jill. She has 3 kids, and she teaches the SymptoThermal method of natural family planning. There's 3 or 4 primary methods, and she teaches the SymptoThermal method, which checks your temperature, checks your bodily fluids, and, well, we'll go into it. So listen on the show, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Valen, Alvin, any closing words? Or you guys want to say bye? Okay, enjoy the show, guys.
No.
What do you have?
Bye.
Bye. Okay, guys, enjoy the show.
You're listening to the FamVestor podcast. If you're looking to raise your family with intention, gain financial independence, and live a life of true freedom, you're in the right place. Join us as we explore together how to create thriving families, because strong families are the cornerstone for a world at peace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I am very excited to welcome a guest on the show, and we met her 6 years ago, right before getting married. We started taking classes at her home and had such a wonderful time, and, we've kept in touch through the years, constantly asking her questions. And so who I'm talking about is Jill Cherrey, and Jill works for the Archdiocese of Newark as a marriage preparation counselor. And she is also certified in natural family planning, but she helps people, through a practical and spiritual sense, create a strong foundation for marriage. And she is happily married to her husband, Jim. She's been married for 30 years and now has 3 wonderful kids, all around college age. And she seeks to live in the priorities of faith, marriage, and parenting, and share the joy God has provided with anyone who would like to listen. And she loves spending time with her family, deepening her understanding of her faith, and, living to those tenets of strong relationships and walking in beautiful environments. So let's welcome Jill. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So happy to see you and to have you on the show.
Yeah, so in this episode, we really want to dig into natural family planning. We did cover it a little bit in episode 7 of the FamVestor podcast, where we share a little bit kind of about our crunchy parenting journey. Ideas, and we touched on NFP for maybe 10 minutes or something, gave a quick preview, but we want to kind of dig in deep with you. But I feel like you are also a fascinating person, and we'd love to, share or get into your story a little bit further.
Your life's journey and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I'm always telling people how interesting you are. So I'm always telling my children about you. So, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thanks so much. I definitely appreciate that. So I guess to get started, this podcast is all about family, finance, and freedom. And just, from where you are now, how was your upbringing? Do you have a starting point that kind of geared you to the life you are leading now? And maybe what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, tell us about your background.
Well, I was brought up in a very traditional home. My mom stayed home. My dad was a physicist. He designed airplane parts with an airline company, design company. And so I had a very New Jersey suburban upbringing. Very formative was my grammar school Catholic education in that I just had really, really good people and religious and such that gave me a foundation that I left a bit after I left that school, but that always came back to me. It always stuck with me. And then I went to my town's high school, but my parents were till death did they part, and so I had a strong, and I remember my parents had a period of time where they were engaged in a marriage encounter. And so there was a significant period of my childhood where marriage was, in fact, really very underlined as important and a focus. But we were always very important to my parents, and they were very family oriented. So that was my upbringing.
So a really great, solid starting place in terms of the family. That's wonderful.
No doubt.
And you've now taught marriage preparation to about 8,000 couples. What do you, when did you get married, and what do you wish you kind of had known that you know now back then?
How many hours do you have? And so just to clarify that 8,000, these are in classes. Right. So we're seeing, anywhere between 30 couples and maybe 50 couples at a time. We were married. Jim was in the military, so our engagement was kind of quick. And when I joined him out in North Dakota, because it was between being separated, keeping a long distance relationship, or getting married. So we chose to get married, made everybody plenty nervous because I was 20 years old. And frankly, we knew just about nothing. Really what carried us getting married that young, Jim also came from a very family-oriented environment, and his parents were also till death did they part. His mother is still very much alive and active, but we did lose his dad. So that's what really carried us, was ascending to certain principles. We just had an understanding of the principles of marriage and to work through it, but just about everything else we kind of had to learn the hard way as we went through more of the practical things. And it's just so gratifying. We grew up together because we got married so young, and we just learned everything together. So Did
you know each other in school?
We did not, though. Interestingly, Jim lived across the street from my father's sister and her family. So our families knew one another. So when I told my parents that I was going to go out with him, they knew exactly who he was and who his family was. So we did have that connection, but we didn't remember that we had been together at parties and such when we were little.
Wow. How amazing. That sounds like a true spun Americana story.
Yes.
Yeah. So where did the idea, because I know you homeschooled your 3 children, now getting ready for college, in college, where did that idea come from? Were you homeschooled? Was your husband homeschooled?
Not at all. In fact, I think we pretty much shocked everybody. Though I have to say, when we started homeschooling, there was that little bit of, I don't know, my friend said, there's just that little, we look like kind of exotic bugs. People thought we were kind of interesting. So it wasn't that it was like weird anymore so much, but a lot of people found it interesting. But when I went to school to be a teacher, and so I did come out and I taught a junior high and high school math. So I had teacher in me. And then I think what I just realized over the years, and I could even see it in my childhood, I could see how much I was drawn away from family, and how hard it was to keep just, with activities and friends and everything else, I just saw just naturally the system that we have set up isn't really designed to maintain the kind of influence. And I'm not saying people can't do it. God bless them, they can. But honestly, when we got to the point of having children, I simply wasn't confident that we would be able to maintain influence over in our children's lives. And that's really, that's what our job is, right? Is to be able to guide them and love them. I frankly, I think a lot of people can do it very well. I didn't have confidence that I thought it was going to be that hard, and there was just too much at stake. And I just love teaching. So I remember we actually signed my son up for a preschool when he was 3. We hadn't at all thought about homeschooling, like not a bit at that point. Everything I just said came after. But we brought him to the preschool, and I'm an educator, so I couldn't wait to hear about all of the things they were going to do with my little 3-year-old. I mean, when I tell you rose-colored glasses I walked in with, and they just started talking about parking and how they had to sit at the table and all this stuff, and I laughed at my poor husband on the way home. I cried the whole way home. And he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, they're talking about how he's going to have the snack and what he has to bring in. And so so that's when I talked to actually some friends who homeschooled, and they said, are you crazy? He's 3. Just homeschool him this year. Worry about preschool next year if you want. And for some reason, I thought maybe it's a good idea to talk to my pediatrician. And so I went, and I realized, I'm a very spiritual person. So looking back, I realized that there was a gift here, because I went to the pediatrician in the practice that was from the Midwest. And she looked at me and she said, 3? She said, we don't send children to school in the Midwest at 3. Don't worry. Do whatever you think is right. So I had that support, which may not have come. So anyway, what happened was we then just homeschooled that year. And frankly, we just all fell in love with it. And every year we said, oh, this, that, maybe we just... we loved it.
Wow, awesome.
Wow, so you started at 3. That's ambitious.
My kids
too.
never went to school until my daughter did go to our local Catholic high school her last 2 years, just because she's an introvert, and I just, that's a whole other story. But really, it was only because we felt she had a particular need. Otherwise, my kids never went to school. Wow. College was their first school.
Fantastic. Awesome. I can relate to that as similar for me growing up too.
That's right. And
Homeschool isn't it?
And I don't know about you, Sunbury, but my kids adapted to college immediately. I mean, there was just no issue. Did you find the same
here?
Thing? Right? No issue.
No issue. No.
Yeah, and you started at 16 college, or was it 17? At
17, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And you graduated summa cum laude. You were
Right.
I almost feel in a way that homeschooling sets students up for better success in college than most, because you're trained to be an independent thinker and an independent learner, and you kind of develop that self-discipline over many years, whereas the typical school education, it's very spoon-fed, and you do only what's directly asked of you, so it's hard to perhaps make the shift toward college education, which is a lot more independently driven.
I saw exactly the same thing. That would be one of the 2 top things I would say that helped prepare them for college the most. Like you said, it's gradual. They do that over time, and they learn their own discipline. They learn who they are. I mean, I had one that he would have just been a fidget pants in school, and he was just every half hour he'd go out and he'd shoot like 15 hoops and come in and keep going, or go out to the swings. And he just learned how to take care of himself to get his schoolwork done. And the second thing that I found, and I don't know if you did, but I found the extra time that they had, my kids understood what they wanted to do earlier. They just knew who they were a little earlier. I would say a lot earlier with the boys. So a lot of people just, I think, their logic is that they would have trouble with the transition, even just the discipline of getting up in the morning, and we just didn't find that.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, there's plenty of discipline in a home education system as well.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look the same as your regular 8-hour school day or whatever it is.
That's right, absolutely.
So we want to dive into natural family planning.
Sure.
When we were thinking about getting married and, starting our relationship together, living together and all of that, we started to think, okay, we don't necessarily want children right away. We want to spend some time together, thinking, developing our relationship before diving into creating that family. And I mean, I feel like you have a little bit of story there. You had said you spent a couple of years in Germany with your husband abroad, and I'm sure that was, like you said, you grew up together, you grew yourselves. What are your thoughts on that?
Curious about how it unfolded in your life. Did you find natural family planning as a method for your family right away, or was it a journey to discovery of the method? And how was your journey towards finding NFP and then further coming to the decision to become an instructor in NFP?
Well, so we began with contraception. I mean, I used the pill, when I was coming of age. I was very tied to a woman's right. It was very much just, this is what you do. So that's what I did. And then when we were ready to start trying to have children, which we did probably after I was done. Was it after my graduate degree? No, it was probably earlier than that. We were probably thinking about it before that. So I'd say after I was done with my undergrad. So
how many years of marriage is that about?
I would say we were married by that point. I'd say by about 3-year point. I finished, I got 2 bachelor degrees. So I would think, in fact, what probably happened is after that, because I can't remember exactly, I'm sorry, probably after I finished my bachelor's, my first one, we thought we'd start to try, but it wasn't happening. So I went back for my second bachelor's that I wanted. And then it got more serious because when I would come off of the pill, I noticed I wasn't feeling well. And I eventually got diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so they said the treatment for that was to be on the pill. That's what would make you feel better. It would regulate your cycles. So I said, well, great. I need my cycles regulated. It sounded like a good deal. And sure as heck, I felt better on it. That's for sure. But then I thought, well, I guess in my mind, I thought I didn't really look into this that much. This was pre-internet. Oh, my goodness, I'm dating myself. We couldn't just look things up. But boy, when I got to the internet and I could start looking things up, things changed for me. So I would come off the pill and I'd feel sick. And I couldn't figure out because they said it would regulate my cycle. So I'd be on it for a while and think I could get off. And then I'd feel sick. And they'd say, well, you have to stay on if you want to feel better. So I kept doing that and going on. And finally, I just said, look, we want to get pregnant. And I can't get off without feeling good. And they said, well, we'll take you off of these hormones and we'll put you on other hormones to help you get pregnant. That's when I started thinking, and I said, oh, nobody knows how to solve this problem. They're just going to continue to manipulate my body one way or the other. So that's when I started to do extra research. And I found a doctor that basically said, well, when they say it, he was more of a natural doctor. Today, we would call it like functional medicine. Back then, he was just a natural doctor. And he said, well, I said, the pill's supposed to regulate, but when I get off, I explained what's going on. And he said, they say regulate, but that's more like an industry term to control a process. He said, it doesn't regulate in the way you think it does. It shuts down your system. It's like like a chemically induced menopausal state. That's why your symptoms go away. But as soon as you go off, your body upregulates into the same problematic pattern.
Interesting.
And I said, oh.
So he said, it solved the symptom, but it didn't deal with the underlying issue.
Well, yeah, the way to, I mean, it's kind of like inviting an electrician to your house because you have a problem. They go down to the panel and they just shut off all the electricity. And they say, and then they just ask you for your check, and they said it's solved. So that's really all the hormonal contraception did. And I, frankly, I felt completely duped, and I felt pretty. I consider myself a curious person and a little bit of a researcher, and I didn't feel too intelligent at that moment when I realized what had been going on. And this is not the doctor's fault, right? This is their protocol. They're not trained in anything else. Right. So anyway, he said, look, you'd have to come off of the hormones. We'd have to let the problem surface and try to solve the problem. And we did. I'm not saying it was easy. And I had to pay more than just, what you're able to pay at the doctor. But I had 3 babies in 3 years after.
Wow.
Matthew wasn't born until 5 months before our 10th anniversary. But once we solved the problem, got to the end, and I haven't touched a hormone since, haven't needed it. And that is the time at which natural family planning, that's when we started to realize the need to track the cycle and to understand it. And we're like, oh, because this also was a way to track progress with, how you're doing hormonally. And it's always been a report card. what's going on. And it's very helpful. So why did I become an instructor? Because women need to know, couples need to know, because it also had a profound effect on our marriage, that I can share when you're ready. But it wasn't just the physical stuff. But when I look back at how I was indoctrinated and formed, and women don't know and couples don't know. And so I felt a passion to share this beautiful thing.
Amazing, because you saw the life-changing effects of it in your own life. That's quite a profound testimony.
That's exactly why I do it. That's exactly why I do it. It wasn't for me. There are I know people who learned about this very young. They were brought up in families that used it, and they just naturally went into that. And that is such a beautiful thing. It's not my story. We just learned as we went and saw the effects as we went, and it was just all in real time. This works.
Right. I think it's a really powerful message, because I feel a lot of women, especially in our American modern day culture, we really are out of touch with our bodies, just how they work, how they're supposed to naturally function in a healthy manner.
That's right.
We put a lot of pollutants into our bodies. We eat a lot of things that are playing with our hormones, our emotions. They're not the best decisions for us. And on top of it, we're complicating it with chemicals and, artificial contraceptives or that sort of thing that is further complicating your situation, where when you come to a place of wanting to have kids, you're probably, your body's going haywire. And culturally, we don't even know it. There's a lot going on that's under the surface. We're a very incredibly intricate machine, right?
Yes.
But in our culture, we aren't really educated in how to maintain that machine properly. So
just the easiest, quickest solution that seems to work, just push that forward.
And I gotta tell you, time and again, I speak to women who deal with infertility issues or who have had bad experiences with various types of contraceptives. And, most of them never knew there could be complications going into it, because it just was status quo. This is what everybody does. And the doctors say it's safe, and for some it may be, but for others it can have damaging effects. And I think whether or not a couple chooses to go along with NFP, just the knowledge that comes with it is life-changing.
Attending your classes in your home were just so illuminating, for me especially, but even for Sunray, just learning about your body and, that's why that happened. And and then it opened up, the communication between us. We can start talking about these things. And I think that just super strengthened our relationships, just being able to, bring it up so that we can start communicating and then really build a strong foundation where, nothing was really taboo. We could talk about it, about how you felt that day, and then work through our relationship together on the same page.
Well, Sonny, I have to tell you, one of the most profound things, I think that men tend to think this is a little bit more geared toward the woman, and in the sense that it's, her body we're tracking because he's always fertile, but the NFP husband, knows her. He, I think that, I know we're a little confusing to the guys, right? We're confused because there's so many, with all the hormonal shifts comes mood and energy shifts too. And he knows her. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched the NFP husband say, you know what? Right now, this is outside of norm. He's picked something up that isn't quite right because he knows her. And there's this, so this is very profound for husbands to understand their wives and to be able to help her, because we tend to be in the storm so much and being thrown. We don't always know when the waves really start to get a little crazy. And he can very nicely and gently, help her see that.
So, I feel like we've been kind of skirting around NFP, but can you just explain for the audience and simply what is NFP?
Right, and NFP, natural family planning. How do you define it?
So natural family planning is actually an umbrella term, and underneath that umbrella are a number of different methods that all have the same goal. And it is for the couple to be able to define whether they are in a period of infertility or a period of fertility. And that's really the goal, for them to understand so they can make decisions of whether they're going to come together or not based on their family planning intention. And so how do we do this? How do we know if a couple is infertile or fertile? And we always refer to couple fertility because nobody gets pregnant on their own. This is a couple thing. And so we know where the gentlemen are, right? They're always fertile. And then the ladies were then tracking her cycle, and her body just shows certain signs and symptoms that occur when that change from infertility to fertility. For example, a basal morning temperature, depending on the method. The difference among the methods are which biomarkers do you check, but they're all trying to determine whether you're infertile or fertile. So let's take temperature. If you take your basal morning temperature every morning at the beginning of the cycle, when it's going to show you through the cycle whether you're in the beginning of infertility, move to fertility, or you're infertile. So you're tracking certain biomarkers to understand the cycle, and then you're making a decision as a couple, what choices you're going to make depending on if you're ready to welcome babies or not.
Amazing.
Okay, awesome. And for those who have heard of the rhythm method, what is the rhythm method and how does that relate to today?
Okay, well, it's 90-year-old technology. So it technically falls under the term natural family planning, but with anything else scientific, it has developed in time. So the rhythm method is an old method that it really just seeks to predict when you will be fertile based on like a last cycle. But we know that the body, our bodies don't do the same thing all the time every cycle. And so that's why it was so it was just ineffective. But modern methods, we now have biomarkers that we can be tracking day in and day out, so we can see in real time what's going on. So we don't know. That was, again, 90-year-old technology that has developed now into methods that are just as effective as using hormonal contraception. And I say that you have to say eventually what you need to do to get those high efficacy rates, because with hormonal contraception, you're just taking a shot or a pill. With NFP, there are certain behaviors associated with getting high efficacy rates, but for couples who want it, they can have it.
Right.
And our experience is it is, it does take a lot of discipline. It does take a lot of work, but we found it to be so worth it, just in the terms of, with utilizing NFP and practicing it, there comes periods of abstinence and comes periods of, if you're looking to prevent pregnancy, so NFP can be used to prevent or achieve pregnancy, right? And if you're looking to prevent, there's different periods of time where, you can be more intimate or not, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And we found so much, it really seemed to strengthen our relationship, just talking about and experiencing it together and making a decision as a couple. What are we looking to do right now, and communicating that with each other. So we really love that about NFP.
Right, and that's a good point that when the real questions come in, when you know that you're at a fertile time, that's really when the big questions come for NFP. Are we going to come together? Are we going to abstain? These high efficacy rates come for couples who are willing to abstain. There are fertility awareness methods out there that are secular, that they will, on one hand, claim the high efficacy rates, and on the other hand, say that you can use other forms of contraception during the fertile time. However, the studies are done with abstinence, and the marriage benefits come with the abstinence. And, why is that? When you look at the sexual embrace, there's quite a hormonal cascade associated with that. We don't really have to work to, feel close. And so what happens if we don't, in my faith, there's fasting, that we fast during a period called Lent, and we understand that sometimes it's a good thing to put aside, pleasures to think about certain higher things and other things. And so what happens is that we don't just rely on a hormonal cascade that even marriage counselors say that you can it can be used as a crutch in marriages, and that you take this break and that you learn to develop things on a deeper emotional level, and you hold it together. It's not easy all the time, but it becomes that partnership. And I think what's happened is that we don't realize that fertility, we've so much taken for granted that we should just shut it down to manage it, that we don't take for granted all the other things in marriage. Our finances, like you guys so wonderfully share with everybody else. You have this partnership about handling your finances together. We have a partnership of handling our time together. All of these resources for joy were given, but we've been kind of sold this idea that, well, we just shut down our fertility. But NFP says, wait a minute, this is another marriage mission that we can hold together and can bring us closer. And I mean, this is where we co-create with God. I mean, this is like the most miraculous point. And NFP fosters this. It allows us to do that.
Right. I know from my own experience, too, I feel that NFP creates a much greater respect, both for the man and understanding his wife, but also, coming from my side of the story, just growing of respect and deep appreciation for my husband. The fact that he's able to abstain, when it may not be the easiest for him, but he understands why we're doing it, and he's doing it for us and our planned future goals. And to me, that was very powerful too. So I loved that aspect of NFP.
Yeah, because there's, we've lost this idea in marriage or the I don't know, this reality that it really means something. It's really higher to say, I'll wait for you, that I'm willing to wait for you instead of just, I enjoy doing this with you. And I think there's this, sometimes what I see over the years, I see that one of the biggest complaints in this area of marriage that a lot of couples have are, he'll typically complain there isn't enough physical intimacy, and she'll complain there's not enough emotional intimacy. And what's happened is that it was always just driven by what he wanted or what she wanted. There was never anything that they did together to order this towards something. And so what happens is it doesn't have the same meaning. And it is. And so what happens is when we both are willing to abstain and we keep it something special, on that honeymoon phase each cycle, I think people don't realize that what happens is while you're abstaining during the fertile time, if you want to postpone, there then comes a honeymoon period where we come back together, and that's every cycle in a marriage. I mean, how do you keep something special with what we've been handed in culture with just 24/7? I mean, any pleasure you have available to just, you take it for granted, and now with this, you actually end up taking a person for granted. So yeah, there's this respect and being able to look at your husband and say, wow, he can do that for me.
Wow. Yeah.
And I don't know how much you know or how much you want to share about, I know there's a lot of negative aspects that aren't really publicized about hormonal birth control.
Oh.
I believe it's listed on the World Health Organization's website as a top carcinogen.
Yeah, so it is listed on the World Health Organization as a group 5 carcinogen, whatever their highest one is. And it's synthetic steroid hormones. It's synthetic estrogen in it. So yeah, I mean, so it has, I like to talk about also what's happening today with the body on hormonal contraception, because I think a lot of times we can end up in the battle of the studies and the statistics.
Right.
But what I can tell a woman that it's doing for you today, and first of all, I also want to take a step back. There's a lot of women who are on this because they feel hopeless because they just can't get better. They can't find medical care that can help them. And so with a lot of compassion for people in that situation, there are functional medicine doctors, there are NAPRO technology doctors, but we do have certain conditions like very severe endometriosis that medically, we're not always there at the point that we can even help a woman. So I just want to say with compassion, this is an important medication for certain women. But keep in mind that I had to find out the hard way that we have a medical system that just uses this because they don't have the training to heal, which is available to a lot of people. Having said that, what I can tell women it's definitely doing today is putting them in a chemically menopausal state where their natural hormones that they need for bone health, for hair, for all sorts of functions are being suppressed. They don't have any natural progesterone. The progestins in these hormonal contraceptives are chemically structured like testosterone. That's why you can get hair loss. So I can tell you today that you're in a chemically menopausal state. These are things they don't say, and that your cycle's suppressed. You're not getting a period. That's a withdrawal bleed. It's just to make women essentially feel like they're getting a period. There is no cycle. They've designed the pill packs and such to look like there is, but unfortunately a lot of women don't have informed choice because they're not cycling, they're not getting a period, they're not ovulating, there is no healthy progesterone. As well, it causes it facilitates gut dysbiosis. That's one of the things it does. It also prevents it actually contributes to vitamin deficiencies, certain B vitamins and such. And also a lot of women like me with PCOS were put on it, but PCOS, an important component is insulin resistance, and the pill increases insulin resistance. It can cause depression. I mean, these are all the things, the mood disorders. So there's a lot of things. I think cancer, this is a big one. I mean, I've had 6 breast biopsies. This is a huge concern for me. Don't get me wrong. But I think telling women what it's doing today probably gets their attention a little more.
Right. And maybe we want to shed more light on, the uses of NFP for achieving pregnancy, just because I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, we know a lot of people who have a hard time achieving pregnancy, and it's kind of surprising, like you don't hear it so much, but it's
so how does
a large number of people.
Right, and how can NFP help with remediating that, or...
Yeah, getting pregnant and having a child.
Sure. Well, first of all, you're looking for certain biomarkers. The woman's body has fluids that help her move sperm life to the outer third of the fallopian tube for conception. It's called cervical mucus. No mucus, no baby. You have to have that. So you're tracking and you're seeing, do you have enough of this? Is this present? And this is akin to his seminal fluid, right? He's keeping sperm alive. She's keeping it's just sometimes men hear that and I think they feel a little uncomfortable with it, but that they have that. That's how they're keeping sperm alive. This is how she's keeping sperm alive. So we have this analogous, physiology. And so first of all, when you can get pregnant because the fluids are there. So first of all, you can target it. The second thing that's helpful is that usually the doctor will say, try for a year and come back. 4 to 6 cycles, you've got data. You've shown that you have focused intercourse during the fertile time. There's something we call peak day that you can show your doctor. We're focusing intercourse. We had intercourse right around peak day when doctors will say that's when you get pregnant. A third thing that can help is that tracking your cycle. At the end of the cycle is when you have the hormone that is needed to maintain the baby and to help for the baby to stay alive. It's progesterone. And at the end of your cycle, if you're tracking temperature or even just the cervical fluids, whatever you're tracking, it's showing you how, after you ovulate, how much time before you get your period. That needs to be a certain amount of time to indicate you have sufficient progesterone to maintain the baby, because you can have early miscarriages and not know. So your chart can kind of, none of it can diagnose anything, but it just, you get to ask the right questions of your doctor, and you can go back early if there are any problems. But otherwise, I think naprotechnology, which is really a progressive medical technology trying to help women and couples deal with these things without the invasiveness of IVF, without the pill. But they say, if you're targeting the fertile time, the percentage is really high. I can't remember how many couples are going to make it by 4 to 6 cycles. So just the knowledge of when, and just knowing, and that's one of the things I try to share in my classes, is the things that you're looking for in your cycle.
Right.
So I have here an example of one of the course charts.
Yes.
And I just wanted to show it to anyone who might be viewing this. But this is what a typical NFP chart might look like.
Over a month span or a cycle span.
Right. Each of these would represent a month at a time. And basically
yes, and you have
on it,
temperatures there. So I don't see the cervical fluids charted there, but these are very good examples.
this is just showing
temperature.
the one checkpoint,
One
right? The
biomarker.
temperature, right? And of course, you recommend 3 checkpoints, 3 biomarkers for accuracy, but temperature is one where you can really kind of see your cycle and how it progresses through the month. I think you are, when you're in the higher temperatures, you are progesterone dominant, right? And the
That's
lower
right.
temperatures, you are estrogen dominant.
That's right.
And estrogen dominant is when you are fertile.
Yeah, so estrogen is going to, after menses ends, estrogen is going to start to build up and lead to peak day. Estrogen is what drives us to ovulation. And then after, and you don't have any progesterone at that time. After you ovulate, you still have estrogen, but progesterone is supposed to dominate it, which is going to drive up your temperature.
Right.
Because you might be incubating. So the body warms up. In fact, this is really kind of interesting. Again, this is how the NFP husband, knows her. And she starts to know herself because progesterone, estrogen, it doesn't just suppress body temperature. Estrogen is associated with adrenaline. It will give her energy. It's associated with serotonin. She's receptive. She's got energy, unless, again, there's hormonal imbalance. But then what's going to happen as soon as progesterone comes in, it comes in very quickly after ovulation, that changes. She's more tired, because what's going to, you might be incubating, this progesterone helps suppress stress hormones. And so she's going to be, it should still be a pleasant mood, but what's going to happen is one day, she's going to be ready to go out and do all this stuff, and she's making extra meals, putting them in the freezer, cleaning the house, and the next day, she's on the couch and she's saying Netflix in Chinese, honey. And, this is confusing, but when we understand our bodies, this is very much, this is very natural and it's very beautiful because her body's always in the mode of either preparing to be open to life or trying to protect a life. And her body looks differently those 2 times. And so understanding and watching that chart, there's mood and energy implications to all that's going on too.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love how charting can tell you so much about yourself.
It's incredible. It's really just, and when you get menses, that's like a report card. How is that? Is it painful? Is it heavy? Is it, all of these things give you, they really prepare you to ask questions of your doctor. It can't diagnose anything, nor can your NFP instructor, but everybody can say, wait a minute, let's ask these questions.
And before you recommend a person to utilize NFP, well, I guess first, how do you recommend people get educated on how to use NFP, and what do you hope that they plan for in terms of before utilizing it in their lives? What kind of span of time do you encourage of charting? Or
Look, we could take somebody in off the street and have them charting right away, and I can just work a little more closely with them to interpret the chart. We can get people running up right away. It really just takes a period of abstinence at first to make sure she can clearly observe signs without the interference of intercourse and the fluids intercourse, so we can do that right away. If a couple, really wants to learn, I would say, 3 or 4 cycles would make you feel really comfortable. Like if you wanted to use this before you were married, I would say 3. The earlier you come, the better. You're just going to know your body that much more. You're going to have that many more questions answered. So the earlier, the better. But I will say that for people who want to use it, because I think the temptation is, in this day and age, to go ahead and self-learn. And I do that myself with everything. I get that. Or just download an app. But it's important to mention that you have, if you want the efficacy rates, you really have to just go ahead and take it. There are online courses. I do here. We're in the same area. I do it locally in my home. There's so many online options. You need to take a class with a certified instructor and keep up with it. This is not rocket science, but we're just not there yet. The algorithm on a phone app really just can't capture this one. So
right.
we're not there. And so there's so many devices and stuff. So I just want to tell people, if you want the efficacy rate, you got it. You really have to take a class. And they're not expensive. Most of them are through, the Catholic Church. I know there's others. I haven't looked into them. These are ministries. They're, they don't make money.
And the particular method that you teach and recommend is?
So I like SymptoThermal. There's a number of different ones, and I think different people may need different ones. I like SymptoThermal, what does that mean? Which biomarkers? Because that's what really is going to differentiate your different methods. Mine uses temperature and tracking cervical fluids. And that's just a woman just walking around can tell. She sees it on the tissue in the bathrooms. This is not like something big and scientific that you have to do.
And temperature is a thermometer, right?
Yeah, that's just taking your temperature in the morning with a thermometer. And the reason I like this one is because the temperature is such an easy objective sign that even when there's a little confusion starting with the cervical fluids, that's all normal and we get everybody up, spun up. But that temperature, you have two biomarkers. So that's SymptoThermal. And my particular, people can look online. I use SymptoPro. It's with an organization that is out in Oregon, Northwest Family Services. And so we use that. But, there are other SymptoThermal methods. There's Couple to Couple League. There's a number of them. So you can look up. Again, there's different organizations that do that method. But somebody who's having hormonal imbalances, there is an entire technology called naprotechnology that has been developed to help couples, not have to go down the IVF road. It's got a lot of baggage financially.
IVF is in vitro fertilization.
Thank you very much. It's in vitro fertilization, and it has a lot of baggage morally, financially, physically. And also again, this organization was developed to help develop protocols and approaches for that and hormonal imbalance, that people just use the pill for. And so, naprotechnology designed an NFP method called Creighton method. And that's a little different. But when you learn Creighton method, you are in line with doctors who practice naprotechnology. And so, there's also something called Marquette method. Anybody can use it. It's very effective. But postpartum women tend to find it very helpful because it's a symptohormonal method because they actually track estrogen metabolites in the urine, I believe, with one of the tests. And they do that with so there's just these different methods. They use different biomarkers and different people, different women may, do better with different ones.
Or you may do better depending on where you're at in your life. Like you mentioned, when you're postnatal,
yes,
for instance, you're breastfeeding, I know on our experience, then sometimes your chart doesn't look like it's going anywhere.
And it isn't because you're not cycling.
Right.
And so the trick when you're charting after you have a baby is watching for that first ovulation. Mm-hmm. And that's really what you're tracking, but it gets confusing because the fluids get a little confusing sometimes. Some women know, but other women tend to get very confusing signs, and it's very hard for them to know, have I gotten there yet? Have I not? And I've just talked to women that stepping like to Marquette can help. So again, it's very individual, and that's why it's important. My job is not just to teach. I coordinate natural family planning for my diocese. I'll serve anybody. This is not just for my diocese. But what happens is that I'm a clearinghouse of information because different people need different things.
Right, and I love that you mentioned that because perhaps for some listeners who maybe are not Catholic might feel intimidated by the idea of approaching a diocese and asking to participate in their programs. But I think for the most part, right, it's more of a ministry, and it's open to anyone. It's not limited.
Absolutely.
Just to
I serve anyone, and perhaps you can witness to what it was like going through this program. We don't.
Yeah. With us, we aren't Catholic. We are believers, but not of the Catholic faith particularly, but Jill was very open to having us come on board with her course, and it really was something that was welcoming and very, very interdenominational. It was wonderful, actually.
It'll have spiritual overtones, and I'll share the spiritual depth of it. I may even share it through the lens of Catholic theology, but everyone's welcome. It's not.
Right.
It's not like that. It's not a Catholic theology class.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful we had the opportunity to take that with you. I feel like it's been such a blessing in our lives. Yeah, and like you said, we just love sharing that because it's not. No one knows. It's very few people know about it.
And it's people make jokes about it, and and unfortunately, also what's happening is that a lot of people will go and say it's not effective, and you have to ask questions. You have the first question is, did you take a certified class with an instructor and follow up? Because a lot of times that question is answered, well, no, I downloaded an app or I read a book. So right now, so there's a lot of this doesn't work. And also I think some of the negative things that you'll see on the internet about it, other than it doesn't work, is that, it's hard to use. And what typically happens is that NFP reveals things. In and of itself, it's a data collection and analysis method. But NFP gets hard when when our hormonal balance is that far off that our charts are confusing. It's, I would say that's not really NFP. That's what it's revealed. It's kind of like a budget. A budget in and of itself, doesn't make, finance is hard. It just kind of reveals realities, and that's what NFP does. And it can reveal, difficulties with abstaining, which is very hard to talk about, and it's difficult. But marriage is the path to learning to love, and that's okay. And then we have to take that on. Right. So I think that these are the things. I think when we see negative things about it, we have to start thinking about: are they talking about what it revealed, a weakness, and that there's just a normal struggle? It's easy to, that's often what happens, or maybe they really haven't done it the right way, because we kind of, again, with the downloading the apps and everything else, we're just at a time we're not quite understanding. Sometimes we have to go the long route. Right.
Or also, I know I've had a few friends who said, NFP, we tried, it didn't work. And then, unfortunately, it's a damaging message to put out there without further explanation. Then when you delve deeper, it's like, well, during our abstinence period, maybe we used a condom and then that broke. And that's okay. So it wasn't the NFP method. It was resultant of something else, but sometimes that story isn't fully told.
Right. I mean, it really, the budget is the best analogy I can give. I mean, of course, NFP is dealing with something sacred and profound in marriage, but practically speaking, it's the budget. It's, it takes a discipline. It takes adhering to something, doing something day in and day out. And that's where you're going, and working with people who can tell you what, you don't understand. Those are all the principles. And that's what you have to commit to. There's just no easy way around things in life, but you can have it. It's here if you want it.
Right. So how long is a typical course?
The course that I teach, we do in a period of 1 month, one calendar month, we do 3 classes. We try to separate them by 2 weeks. Sometimes a little less. I try to get in one calendar month. And so we do kind of the book work and understanding terms and getting a basic idea of charting in those 3 classes. And they're also designed that way because we'd like to see a woman's entire cycle while she's in class. So if we see her over the course of a month, we're most likely to see an entire cycle and have her catch what's going on. But as I always try to say in the last class, that I hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation. It's very important to know that these are ministries that are designed to help people. I get baby pictures, and I get to talk about the postpartum period and what to do. I get charts on honeymoons. This is about an accompaniment to be able to use this over time. You're not just going to learn what you need in class and go. Your body's going to do all sorts of things, and that's what I'm here for. So the class itself, mine is 1 month. Others do it over more time. Like the most important thing, there's always a class component, and the most important thing is the follow-up, because that's when it becomes real on your charts.
Helping to interpret what you're seeing on your data charts.
That's right. And eventually a couple, you're working more closely at the beginning, and then you learn, and then you have a little time, and then always something confusing, and then you learn what that is, and then just naturally it becomes less and less over time until, whenever something happens, you just send in your chart.
Right.
So, working with all these couples throughout the years, what have you seen as the biggest blessings of teaching NFP, that you see in your students, or? Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. The joy of seeing that it can work if you're willing to work on it, and starting to see. I think one of the most special times in class is watching. I always have him do the charting. I mean, Sonny, it's 3 points of data. And I always really reinforce, because this is going to be another thing that's going to make NFP hard. If she's just doing it and she's saying red light, green light,
Right.
it's, and there's going to be seasons of that because we're busy or whatever, but it's not going to be the long-term way to really enjoy using this. And so what happens is I always have him chart during class, and she's working with the observations that she's, kind of the fabricated app, so they can learn how to chart. And when they come back that second class and he's got her chart and he's conversing with me about what's been going on with her, and there's always this tender moment that I'm just looking at her, looking at him. And that he cares, and he's like, if you say anything, like, you see how she's looking at you, he's like this charting. I mean, it's three things, but men don't realize how significant it is for her not to just be looked at, but to be seen. And that's a very profound moment. So I would say, just on a regular basis, that's the most fun moment. But to see a couple like you that have embraced this, and you know what it is by this point, that you've been married, you see that it's not always easy. I mean, you see real life. It's different from what class looks like. But to take that on and to see that, it's worth it.
Right. Well, Jill, thanks so much. I know we've touched a lot on NFP. I do want to kind of touch on some more things.
Sure.
Especially from a financial aspect, I guess. A lot of families these days are dual income families. How were you guys able to make the decision to, get rid of your teaching salary and go towards one income?
So I think for us, our foundation with Jim having started in the military, I think how you start your marriage really helps. One of the things that I'm a little sad about is that I don't think a lot of couples see this as, I think that's automatically assumed that there's going to be dual income, especially in our area.
Yeah.
So it makes me sad that there's not even that consideration of, generally that motherhood is this thing to even consider, staying home, or even fatherhood.
Right.
Sometimes that's more practical.
Right.
But so we had a good start in the military, and my career was always just kind of, I was following Jim. So I was really just, doing what I could wherever I went. I was, teaching. But by the time we came here and bought a house, we'd already been married almost 10 years. So financially, we just bought a house at that time, what we could afford, knowing that, the salary would only go up. And frankly, we were just doggedly committed to being home with the kids. I remember walking into this house 21 years ago, just about. And I remember as I walked into the house, the first thing I said to Jim is I said, I love my new house. And if this keeps me from staying home with the kids, it goes. And so we were just doggedly committed first to being with the children. And we made just all financial decision based on that.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
So
I love that intentionality,
Right,
where
right.
family isn't kind of
an afterthought, is very
Right, or-
intentional, your decision, and how all your decisions were based on that one priority that you made in your lives.
yeah,
and that
wonderful.
set
You
us
could-
up being used to living on one income and buying a house based on what we could afford with one income. That set us up then when it came time, the option to homeschool was there. We had already, we'd already adjusted to that. That wasn't like that if we had even thought about homeschooling after being accustomed to, dual income. And I have to tell you, I even know a couple who both, high level professionals, they had their kids, but then later in life, when he had a health issue, they had to sell everything off because they had to go down to one income. And her and what she tells couples preparing for marriage is just do it on one income. You just don't know. You have to learn. You have to set that up as how you can live.
Right. Yeah, if you can save one person's income or something like that, and just get ready to, never increasing your standard of living and always living below your means.
That's right.
And I will say, in the Northeast area where we are, it is very challenging due to the high price points of cost of living around here, but there are creative ways in which people can still manage to make it work if they choose that that's the direction they like. For instance, we went into buying a multifamily house
hacking,
where that allowed me to give up my profession as well. So that was how we managed to make that work on our end.
So I love what you guys are doing, because this is just an area people feel trapped. They wouldn't even feel like they had the option, even if they were thinking along those lines. So that's what I love what you're doing, and to catch people early enough. I mean, we have all of our children are commuting to college. They're going to go out. We talked to them the importance of going out with no debt. I mean, you had to start early with these considerations, and so it's good what you're doing, because even if people are struggling where they are and maybe have to make some tough decisions or try to, they can set a path for their kids, that maybe they didn't have.
Right. Yeah, we see so many of these couples who feel trapped. They graduated with 6 figures in debt, and maybe now they're getting in their mid-30s, and they want to start having kids, but they want to pay down this debt, and then they both have to work, and it's just like this.
And they're looking for a home, and
it just like all piles on.
Up.
They gotta have the car payment, the house payment, and all these things, and it just delays what they feel is important, but they feel that they can't do it.
Right. You get trapped.
Yeah.
In a way, in this hamster wheel.
Right. But
and that's why it's so beautiful what you're doing. I know Dave Ramsey does a lot with debt, but that for people to feel like there's a way, it's going to be tough. The one thing, the big thing they have is youth, that there's a lot you can do with energy to help yourself in that situation, and then to have the skills that you guys have learned, Dave Ramsey, to put them out there. And this is, it's right along the lines of natural family planning, right? I mean, there's just skills and knowledge that can help people. They don't need to feel trapped.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember when we were saving for our house, I remember one Saturday, we thought about doing something. We didn't want to spend money. And so he had seen a local advertisement at the florist that they were looking for drivers for Mother's Day. So we said, well, why don't we spend the day making $50 instead of spending $50? And we spent the day, and how fun is that, handing people flowers? And so we just drove around in a van all day, handed out flowers. And those are the types of things that, that's what you have to think about.
I love that.
Awesome.
I love that.
So, Jill, just wrapping up, what is some of the best advice you have for couples and families just starting out?
I think the most important thing, the thing that's going to bring you joy, is becoming one well. And that's in all areas. And so to think about the different areas, whether it be where are you financially, how do you integrate that? Emotionally, how are you going to on a regular basis integrate that? We live in a culture of married singles, but that's not, in the long run, you're not going to be satisfied. How are you going to integrate that? How are you going to integrate your time, your families, this idea of fertility and integrating it, holding together? That is intimacy, intimacy, and becoming one in marriage is where we do that in 100 different ways. So I think the most important thing is to prioritize intimacy in all of these different ways, and learning how to and to become one and to hold these things together.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up that point too, because I know through various marriage books we've read, about how starting out you have the highs of the in-love experience, but what truly carries you through life in a lasting relationship, a lasting marriage, would be when you've come to that point of building true intimacy with one another, and then it's no longer those highs and emotional highs and lows of the in-love experience, but the intimacy you've built with one another, where you truly have become one. So I'm so glad you made that point.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I guess, what we'd call is the friendship. But I think, setting up a way to do that. And I think that we still can return to those in-love experiences. And I think that honeymoon phase with NFP offers it. And I think finding ways to just get in our bubble, just the two of us, here and there, and gaze into each other's eyes and just, be crazy about, those periods of time, the romance will still be important, but the friendship carries the load. That's right. Day in, day out, what makes you the happiest. And this is it's so exciting to see you guys do this, because you're such a model for having, holding this more important thing together and helping this spiritual connection of making the world a better place with what God has given you. This is one of the, people don't know this. That's one of the strongest ties in marriage, is when we try to do something together to make the world a better place. And that's like our mission, to have missions together. So you guys are just a beautiful example of that.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
that. You're a couple as well. I love how you had here in your marriage that you're happier now after 30 years of marriage than on your wedding day in your bio.
Without question. And if you're not something, you're supposed to grow. You know,
Right.
you're supposed to get happy. You're supposed to learn how to manage conflict better. And instead of conflict, having that turn to intimacy, right? I mean, I had a couple, they were so cute. She approached me and she said, it was 2016. And she says, look, she says, one of us is voting for Trump. One is voting for Hillary. It's killing us. And so I tried to talk to her a little bit about the fact that, well, we stay on the level of opinions. And I tried to encourage her to the deeper levels of intimacy, that book that I told you about, The 7 Levels of Intimacy by Matthew Cowley, and that we can turn conflict into intimacy. So when you look over a period of time, it's supposed to get better. I mean, you're supposed to know each other better and be able to handle things better and find your mission together and have a mission in life. And so it's supposed to get better.
Right. So you mentioned the 7 levels of intimacy.
Yeah.
Are there any other resources that you found particularly helpful or that you'd recommend to couples looking to strengthen their relationship in whatever area they're interested in?
Yeah, so, well, going back to the kids, Hold On to Your Kids is a great book to help you. Even if you have to work, they have ways in there for people just have to have dual income. They're telling them how to maintain that influence over the kids so they don't have that natural separation to the peers and prioritize the peers over the family. This is key in order to be able to protect and love your children. So hold on to your kids. But 7 levels of intimacy and the 5 love languages, of course. And I'm trying to remember... I'm trying, I'll have to send them to you. I'll have to look on my shelf and send you. But those are always the big ones. And 7 levels of intimacy really can, if you take it to heart and with individual areas of difficulty, you'll see opinions as the 3rd level. See what everything is. Start talking on it's miraculous what it can do. And of course, the 5 love languages doesn't just tell you. I think we treat that book. We don't understand the depth of what it can do, because if you look at it, and Sunmarie, you're a teacher, if you look at the 5 love languages, they really distill down to the 3 learning styles, auditory, kinesthetic, and visual. And that's really the deeper, I think, gift the book gives, is what is the way my spouse interacts with the world most profoundly. Because then that's not just a portal to know how to love them. That's important, but it also tells me how to help them with stress when it comes up. The auditory person is going to be talking to them. The physical person, it's going to be sitting close to them, proximity, whatever it is. And so we can actually help each other manage stress, which is another thing that can lead to conflict, right? I remember we went to my daughter's high school they were doing individual meetings with every set of parents to just go over the process of applying to college to see if we needed anything. And it was like 7:30 in the morning. We went before work and we went and we came out. And I was just so happy. I said, wasn't that sweet? They took that quality time. They took that time to spend with us. Now, my husband is physical touch, so he's kinesthetic, and he likes to move. He looked at me. He said, they could have done that in a night meeting with all of us in the auditorium. That just wasted my time. So now there could have been a real misunderstanding there, because I'm like, wow, that sounds ungrateful. And then I thought, no, he encounters the word kinesthetically. That's frustrating to him, meetings and those type of things, unless they're very important. And for me, I'm like, quality time. So it helps you just know one another. So I think the 5 love languages is very underutilized for what it can help us with in marriage.
I've never really thought about that. Well, I mean,
we've
read
that's
it
a very good point.
how many times now? But that is a very good point, just in understanding how your spouse understands the world. I love that you made that connection and brought it to light here.
And then, of course, Sunmarie, what happens then is we can understand our children, right? Everything we do with marriage, we learn to communicate better. You're clarifying questions instead of accusations, 5 love languages. All of a sudden, all this skill that we're gained in marriage is now we can pass it on to our children.
Right.
And we can understand them better, but also, marriage preparation begins in childhood in the home.
Right.
So.
Right. So true. Very
Yeah,
true.
and you had mentioned that you were lucky enough to raise rebel-free teenagers. How did that come about?
I did. They were great. We had our moments, but it was attachment. It was really learning attachment. It was learning, and when I say attachment, I mean, I guess attachment. That's a Hold On to Your Kids book. But it's maintaining that relationship with them and keeping that connection with them and being very concerned about how things are communicated and just making the family the center and apologizing, if I lost my cool or something like that, not just I'm sorry, but will you forgive me? And to treat them with respect. Look, we had our moments, but that's why we didn't have it, and that's why they're also involved in their faith, because people don't understand that want to raise their kid in the faith. The kids aren't going to be raised in the faith because the theology is great. They're going to be raised in the faith because of the relationship to that faith with the people, and in the home. And so I'm really grateful. And, what starts to come out of my mouth is I'm lucky, but really what is I'm grateful because people taught us how to do that. We didn't know how to do that, and we were taught that.
Right.
Awesome. And, people listening to you, what do you hope to teach, or what do you hope that they get inspired about listening to your story here today?
Well, I'm really hoping that people are inspired to look at marriage differently and fertility differently, that we have to have little missions in each part of our marriage to carry things together and to do that. That's where the satisfaction is. That's where the frustration is, because we're different people. And we need to be different people. We bring different things to the table, but integrating that and working together with each other. I mean, my husband and I have been doing marriage preparation class for 30 years. Do you know how many times that we disagreed on how to do something, say something, or, or somebody said something and the other person's looking shocked at the other side of the room. Did they just say that? And so how many times we had to go through that? But what ends up happening, it's just, after a while, it's just like sitting down at the piano together and just playing a song together that you learn to do because you worked hard at it. So I think what I hope people get inspired by is to take on integrating your time, your money, your fertility, your children, the raising of your children, to make these things shared. Learn how to do them from other people. You're not supposed to know everything. Learn from other people, and just keep working together. That home is going to be the thing that satisfies you more than anything. It's not going to be, I unfortunately lost my sister. She was young. She was in her early 50s, and she was very, she had really worked hard to do well in her career. And you know what happened after she died? They just replaced her. So you have to think about where we're going to give our time and our effort.
Right. Awesome.
Wow.
Jill, thank you so much for spending the time and all
My pleasure.
all the valuable lessons you've shared with us. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about you or just ask you a question about NFP or something else about marriage preparation, where can people reach out to you? rcan.org, and after that, natural family planning. So just put in the browser rcan.org and then natural family planning, and it will come up with a page. And in fact, on that page are links you'll see to about there's a set of links, but ultimately they go to probably 120 or 130 videos, articles, links to NFP organizations. My information is somewhere there. You may have to go on the side and see like staff directory for the Family Life Office. But again, I want to reinforce, I may work for the Archdiocese of Newark, but I will serve anybody that is interested in natural family planning. But yeah, so that's where they can get more information on natural family planning and also my contact info.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Jill, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yes,
Awesome.
It was. Thank you.
Okay, have a good one.
Okay.
Next time on the FamVestor podcast, we are talking... What are we talking about, Valen? We're talking 100 action steps to take to get to where you want to be. So these are 100 action steps I took in my life to kind of transform it, to live more on purpose, and to live towards my dreams and to create this family that we have right here. So if you're looking on our YouTube channel, we got Valen, our co-host, and Alvin, our co-host this morning, since Mommy's doing some studying.
Achoo.
Achoo. Okay, guys. Okay, let's instead of sneezing, let's say bye-bye to our guests. Enjoy your week, guys.
Bye.
Good luck on your dreams.
Achoo.
And Godspeed. Don't take some time to sneeze today. Okay, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Achoo.
Achoo.